Hello horror hounds, welcome to my horror house. A couple of nights ago I watched Eaten Alive by Tobe Hooper, which is a film I haven't seen for years. In fact, the last time I saw it was called Death Trap and released on DVD here in the UK by Vipco, who were, I guess, the Arrow of their day. This was released a couple of years after the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and could have so easily been a retread of Texas Chainsaw, but instead I think it's absolutely fascinating how he decides to take what could have been a very, very similar film, and just by changing the aesthetics, the visual, the feel and the style of the movie, presents some very similar subject matter in a completely different way. Both Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Eaten Alive are set down in the South, both in sort of very oppressive, claustrophobic circumstances. Both are inspired in some small way by notorious real life murders and serial killings. Both involve groups of outsiders coming to a location and then falling foul of the madness and murder that resides in that location. But both movies are wildly different in their presentation, feel and tone. This truly is a stepping stone between Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which upset a lot of people at the time by just not being more of the original. But over time, people have come to appreciate, and I think probably with further lesser and lesser sequels, people have come to appreciate what he did with Texas Chainsaw 2. And with a lot of Tobe Hooper's work, people are coming back and reassessing and reappraising in the light of his entire career, and the fact that he didn't just churn out Texas Chainsaw Massacre again and again and again and again. With Eaten Alive, we are set at the Starlight Hotel run by Judd, who I think it's fair to say is positioned as an ex-veteran. It's never made entirely explicit what war he served in, but he runs this sort of hotel out in the outskirts of town where he has a weird sort of zoo. I mean, extremely run down. There's a monkey in a cage and an alligator in the swamp next to the hotel that he claims is actually a crocodile brought over from Africa. An assortment of weird and wonderful people turn up to the hotel, and a lot of them are killed at the end of his scythe and his mania. As with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Eaten Alive is a descent into a world of madness. But I guess the ultra-realism of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you know, you can feel the heat and the sweat and the dirt and the grime, and it's much more of a documentary style. You could possibly argue, therefore, that that story is being told more from the point of view of the victims, the people arriving, whereas with Eaten Alive, it's filmed completely on a sound stage where everything is hyper artificial and the lighting is unreal. Nothing is naturalistic about this, and people enter this world of madness and mania. It could be argued that we now see a very similar story told from inside the madness out, and the madness seems to affect everyone to a greater or a lesser degree. It's absolutely a stylistic choice, and one that Tobe Hooper made very consciously. In an interview on the Blu-ray, he says what he finds interesting is that only a few short decades earlier, everything was filmed on a soundstage, and that looked normal. Everyone accepted that as normal. It made me think specifically of Universal's The Wolfman, and all the chases and scenes through the fog-bound woods there are clearly sets on a soundstage, and you accept it. That's the vibe of the movie. Whereas, you know, a couple of decades later, 2 or 3 decades later, and you do the same thing on a soundstage in a movie in the late 70s, and it looks weird, it looks artificial and kind of wrong, and playing with that artificiality makes for a fascinating watch. Not necessarily a clean, perfect round the edges movie. This is a really rough and ready film, but that has a vibe to it that is so hypnotizing to me, not least because of the weird unnatural lighting, not least because of the central performance, which is mostly gibberish. The word salad of Judd, who runs the hotel, especially after any murder or after any upset, talking just to himself to sort of calm himself down, and you're kind of stuck in the world of his head, and none of it really makes sense, and none of it really feels real. Some of our characters are clearly wearing wigs. They're not even presented naturalistically as characters. Marilyn Burns, who turns up as one of the guests, is wearing an obvious wig, and later on she sort of takes it off. The film plays with this artificiality and this sort of... Hooper references Grimm's fairy tales and this sort of fairy tale aspect of things, weirdly in a similar way that Dario Argento sort of threw realism out of the window with Suspiria. Tobe Hooper is approaching his material in a very similar way. I don't think Eaten Alive is as well constructed and has as strong a through line as Suspiria does, which sort of plays in dream logic. The script for Eaten Alive is extremely ramshackle. It's kind of like a bunch of things happening over the course of a night. But it's more about being stuck in that place, in that night, with Judd and these people around him, with a weirdly avant-garde soundtrack that's so oppressive. I absolutely adore it. At times seeming to incorporate frogs and crickets and the sound of nature all around, and then at other times weird sort of radio signals. Are they sort of coming from space? Is Judd hearing them in his fillings? Is he receiving transmissions from Mars driving him crazy? And then at other times the radio that he's got on, which gives us an almost continuous backdrop of country and western songs about cowboys and things, which sort of seem to counterpoint and play with notions of America and recent American politics in a similar way that Texas Chainsaw Massacre did, and in a similar way that I think Tobe Hooper does in most of his films. I think it's there in Poltergeist. I think it's there in something like The Mangler. But ultimately it's a film where a bunch of stuff happens and a bunch of people get killed and fed to a crocodile or an alligator, depending on what you want to believe. And because it's so surface in that way, it does kind of invite you to read subtext into it. It almost goads you into finding meaning. And you would be quite right and quite happy if you just want to watch this as a movie about a mad guy who runs a hotel and kills a few people, and then think of it as a sort of mashup between Psycho and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, with the unrealistic fairy tale tone of a Suspiria. And you would be absolutely right. But if you wanted to read some subtext into it, the film kind of says, come on, come at me, give me what you got, anything you want. It starts with a very poetic but very difficult to watch sequence of a monkey, one of the displays he's got for this zoo, this petting zoo. And we see the monkey in the cage dying, and it dies of natural causes on camera. I don't know whether that was something that was happening that they just happened to catch. I don't know if in this day and age I don't know the circumstances of how that was filmed and whether there was any animal cruelty involved. There's no cannibal holocaust levels of discomfort watching it. To me, it's it's weirdly on a level with the footage in Tony Scott's The Hunger, which also captures a lab monkey expiring of natural causes. The strange thing about that sequence, which would normally absolutely turn me off, is that that moment is given the most potency, the most soul, the most emotion. The monkey is afforded more humanity than any other character in the film. And the footage of the monkey is intercut with shots of the gator or the croc sort of surfacing from the water and going back down without comment. And that sequence, I think, really opens the door to inviting analysis. For my own mind, because I'm the kind of person that does like to read things into stuff like that, that spoke to me of the death of... We all have two brains. We have the lizard brain, the hind brain from evolution, and our supposedly evolved big old monkey brain. And what we see at the start of this movie is the death of the monkey, and then the big old reptile, the gator, comes up from the depths of the swamp, from the murk, the subconscious, the unconscious, and is allowed now free roam of this kingdom. The monkey is dead and the reptile lives on. And so the madness begins, and any kind of notion of civility completely unravels throughout the movie. It is a rough and ready movie that can lose you in places and then bring you back in with the performances. Robert Englund's there in a very early screen performance as Buck, who absolutely knows the kind of film that he is in, and he saunters through it with a kind of louche, scumbaggish quality that is absolutely a joy to watch. So it's messy, it's bloody, it's mad, it's weird, but it absolutely says to anyone who cares to pay attention that Tobe Hooper is not a director who is at all interested in documentary level realism in his movies as standard, and is more than happy to trip the light fantastic and will make Poltergeist, The Mangler, Life Force, and probably never really look back to his smash debut Texas Chainsaw Massacre and ever look to replicate that. He decides to continually try and offer something weird and different and new. And sometimes it'll work for you and sometimes it won't work for you. I happen to think that Life Force is an absolute fucking batshit masterpiece. I happen to think that his two-night TV sort of extended Salem's Lot is one of the best Stephen King adaptations that there has ever been. And at other times you get things like The Mangler, which other people love. For me, it's kind of a weird curiosity. It's, yeah, The Mangler, it's a weird one. Eaten Alive is also, yeah, it's a weird one. But it's a weird one that has such a strong sense of place, even though that place is entirely artificial, and plays with that artificiality, throws it in your face. The sets look like stage sets. Sometimes it feels more like I'm sitting in the audience of a theatre watching this on a stage than it does watching a film. And that sense of place is so strong and shot through from start to finish that if you buy a ticket and go on that journey, you're in there. Absolutely. Until the end credits run. And I think that's the mark of a successful film.
I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.